March 17, 1943, found the North Atlantic a tumultuous expanse, approximately 400 miles south of Iceland. Here, convoy HX-229, a vital artery of Allied supply, battled through formidable 15-foot swells. This formidable flotilla comprised 41 merchant vessels, collectively bearing an immense payload of 140,000 tons of crucial cargo destined for the shores of Great Britain. Within the bustling galley of the SS William Eustace, Thomas "Tommy" Lawson, a 28-year-old ship's cook, diligently attended to his duties, washing dishes as the Liberty ship pitched and rolled with violent intensity. High above, on the ship's bridge, Captain James Bannerman vigilantly scanned the vast, unforgiving horizon through his binoculars, acutely aware of the imminent danger lurking beneath the frigid waves. The ominous presence of German U-boats, ever-listening predators, was a certainty. Simultaneously, 600 yards off the convoy's port beam and beneath the surface, Capitan Lieutenant Mansack presided over the control room of U-758. His hydrophone operator, with headphones pressed firmly against his ears, reported in a hushed but urgent tone. Contact bearing 280. Multiple screws. Heavy machinery noise. Estimate 40 vessels. A grim smile played upon Mansack's lips. The formidable German wolf pack was now strategically positioning itself to target the unsuspecting convoy. Yet an unforeseen element was at play, one unknown to Captain Bannerman, to Capitan Lieutenant Mansack, and indeed to all. Tommy Lawson, the unassuming ship's cook, had discerned a peculiar acoustic characteristic of Liberty ships underwater, a subtle observation that held the potential to irrevocably alter the course of the entire Battle of the Atlantic. Over the ensuing 6 harrowing days, a tragic toll would be exacted. 22 merchant vessels from convoys HX-229 and SC-122 would succumb to the relentless North Atlantic, dragging 300 merchant seamen to their watery graves. This devastating period marked the worst convoy disaster witnessed since 1942. Admiral Karl Dönitz, the supreme commander of Germany's U-boat fleet, would later characterize this engagement as the most significant convoy battle in maritime history. The stark statistics painted a grim picture. In March 1943 alone, U-boats succeeded in sinking 567,000 tons of Allied shipping, a figure surpassing any previous month of the war. At this alarming rate of attrition, Great Britain faced a dire prognosis, with only 3 months' worth of food supplies remaining. After 2 or 3 paragraphs, ask us to stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Write a comment about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. The chilling words of Prime Minister Winston Churchill echoed the profound gravity of the situation, who would later confess, "The only thing that really frightened me during the war was the U-boat peril." The German hydrophone technology, a marvel of wartime engineering, proved brutally effective. U-boats possessed the uncanny ability to detect the telltale propeller noise of convoys from an astonishing 80 nautical miles away. Individual merchant ships, even when sailing alone, inadvertently broadcast their positions from distances of up to 12 miles. Their distinctive acoustic signatures, characterized by cavitating propellers, persistent engine vibrations, and resonant hull structures, functioned as unwitting beacons, guiding German torpedoes with deadly precision. Allied escort vessels desperately employed every countermeasure at their disposal. Intricate zigzag patterns designed to confuse, strict radio silence protocols, and diligent ASDIC sweeps. Yet their efforts were largely in vain. The convoys remained inherently too loud, their sounds propagating for miles through the vast oceanic medium. The German U-boats, operating in coordinated wolf packs, simply lay silent 400 feet beneath the surface, patiently listening with their sensitive hydrophones, awaiting the opportune moment to strike from an ideal firing position. What the Allies remained tragically unaware of was that the ultimate solution to this intractable problem would not emanate from the refined intellect of a naval engineer or an acoustic scientist, but rather from the unassuming observations of a merchant ship cook, a man who had left formal education behind at the tender age of 14. Naval Headquarters in Liverpool, England, in March 1943, served as the nerve center for the Western Approaches Command, an organization that had been locked in a relentless struggle against German U-boats for 3.5 arduous years. Despite their tireless efforts, every conceivable countermeasure had seemingly been exhausted. In 1941, the Royal Navy had undertaken the extensive installation of ASDIC sonar systems on every escort vessel within its fleet. This active sonar technology was capable of detecting submerged U-boats at a range of 2,500 yards, but only if the submarine was positioned directly ahead of the escort. The cunning U-boat commanders, however, quickly adapted their tactics, learning to launch their attacks from astern or a beam, thereby remaining safely outside the narrow detection cone of the ASDIC. Compounding this vulnerability, ASDIC proved utterly useless against surfaced U-boats attacking under the cover of night, a favored tactic employed by the coordinated wolf packs. By 1942, scientists at the Admiralty Research Laboratory had achieved a significant breakthrough with the development of high-frequency direction finding, affectionately known as HUF-DUF. This innovative technology proved remarkably effective for pinpointing the locations of submarines that broke radio silence to transmit. However, once a wolf pack successfully established contact with a convoy, they would cease all transmissions, reverting to a silent, passive listening mode. In stark contrast, Allied ships continued to inadvertently broadcast their precise locations with every rotation of their propellers. By early 1943, the Royal Navy had already expended a staggering $8. $7 million, an amount equivalent to $560 million in today's currency, in a desperate bid to resolve the persistent problem of acoustic signatures. Professor Patrick Blackett, the esteemed director of Naval Operational Research, authored a classified paper unequivocally stating that merchant vessel propeller cavitation and machinery resonance create underwater sound profiles detectable at extreme range. Without fundamental hull redesign, impossible during wartime production, convoys will continue to announce their positions to enemy hydrophones. The consensus among experts was unequivocally clear. It was deemed impossible to render a merchant ship sufficiently quiet to evade hydrophone detection. Dr. Harold Burris, the chief naval architect at the Admiralty, meticulously elucidated the underlying physics in a memo dated February 14, 1943. He explained that a Liberty ship's propeller, rotating at 76 RPM underload, displaced an enormous volume of water, between 2,000 and 2,500 tons, through its 15-foot diameter. The ensuing cavitation bubbles, forming and collapsing rapidly on the blade surfaces, generated a broad spectrum of acoustic energy across frequencies ranging from 1 to 100 kHz, precisely the range for which German hydrophones were optimized. Reducing propeller noise, he concluded, would necessitate a complete overhaul of the propulsion system, requiring 6 months of dry dock time per vessel, along with manufacturing capabilities that simply did not exist during wartime. The stakes could not have been higher. Britain relied on sea lanes for 2/3 of its food imports and a staggering 100% of its petroleum needs. In March 1943, German U-boats were sinking Allied ships at a rate faster than Allied shipyards could construct them, with gross tonnage lost exceeding gross tonnage launched for 3 consecutive months. At the Atlantic Convoy Conference, a critical gathering held in London on March 4, 1943, Rear Admiral Leonard Murray, the commander of the Royal Canadian Navy's Atlantic Forces, delivered a stark and unambiguous assessment. "Gentlemen," he declared, "we're losing. Our escorts can't hear the U-boats because of our own convoy noise. The enemy can hear us from 50 miles away. Unless we solve the acoustic detection problem, we'll lose the Atlantic by summer." Various proposed solutions were tabled. Each met with significant practical hurdles. A British naval engineer put forth the idea of installing sound-dampening mounts on every piece of machinery aboard every merchant ship. The estimated cost for this endeavor was $250,000 per vessel, coupled with 12 weeks of dry dock time. With 2,400 merchant ships operating within the Atlantic convoy system, this monumental task would require an unfeasible 138 years to retrofit the entire fleet. An American scientist suggested coating ship hulls with rubber to absorb sound. This concept was rigorously tested, but ultimately rejected. The rubber proved susceptible to rapid degradation in salt water within weeks, created an immense amount of drag, and consequently reduced ship speed by 3 knots, rendering convoys even more vulnerable to attack. A Canadian engineer proposed redesigning propellers with swept-back blades to mitigate cavitation. While an excellent theoretical idea, it was deemed completely unfeasible. Such a change would necessitate the retooling of every propeller foundry across North America and the scrapping of 14,000 existing propellers. By March 15, 1943, Allied naval commanders reluctantly accepted the grim reality. There appeared to be no viable technological solution to the inherent acoustic signatures of convoys. Merchant ships, they concluded, would continue to inadvertently broadcast their positions to every U-boat within hearing range. The only remaining strategy was to bolster the number of escorts, increase air cover, and fervently hope that a sufficient number of ships would survive to sustain Britain's war effort. Yet, some 800 miles to the west, aboard a Liberty ship valiantly battling through a ferocious North Atlantic gale, an unassuming cook was poised to challenge and ultimately disprove the collective wisdom of every expert. Thomas Patrick Lawson possessed no engineering degree, nor indeed any formal degree at all. Born in South Boston, Massachusetts, in 1915, Tommy Lawson had left school at the tender age of 14 to contribute to his family's income during the harsh years of the Great Depression. He initially found employment as a line cook at a local diner, subsequently transitioning to a galley hand position on coastal freighters. When the war erupted, he joined the U.S. Merchant Marine at the age of 26, motivated not by a desire for heroism, but by the comparatively lucrative monthly wage of $125, triple what he had earned in Boston. His captain's evaluation from June 1942 offered a concise assessment. Lawson TP, ship's cook, adequate performance, no leadership potential, recommended for galley duties only. It was clear that no one expected brilliance from the individual responsible for preparing breakfast. After the SS William Eustis, successfully completed 3 perilous convoy runs to Liverpool, Lawson developed an unusual habit. During his off-watch hours, he would regularly make his way to the engine room and simply sit, listening intently. His fellow crew members found this behavior perplexing, often remarking on his apparent eccentricity. "Tommy's going to get himself killed down there," First Mate Robert Chen once commented. "That engine room is hot as hell and twice as loud." But Lawson was not drawn by the heat. He was there because he had noticed something profoundly significant. On February 19, 1943, in the heart of the Mid-Atlantic, the William Eustis was sailing as part of Convoy SC-18, a formation of 63 ships arranged in 9 columns. Lawson was in the engine room when a U-boat alert was sounded. Crouched near the main steam line, the ship's engineer, a gruff Scotsman named Donald MacLeod, shouted over the thunderous roar of the turbines, "Get back to your galley, cook. This is no place for you." A torpedo had just struck a vessel 2 columns over. Through the vibrating hull, Lawson heard it, not the explosive impact itself, but the peculiar sound that followed, the relentless rush of water inundating the dying ship's hull, creating a strange, hollow, booming sound. And then, an abrupt silence. The U-boat could no longer perceive its presence. Lawson urgently grabbed MacLeod's arm. "The sinking ship!" he exclaimed. "It stopped making noise." "Of course it stopped," MacLeod bellowed back. "It's full of water." "No, I mean—" Lawson struggled to articulate his nascent theory. "When water floods the hull, it stops the machinery vibration. The U-boat can't hear it anymore." MacLeod stared at him, a mixture of confusion and disbelief on his face. "So," Lawson continued, pressing his point, "what if we could flood parts of our ship on purpose? Not enough to sink us, just enough to silence the machinery noise." MacLeod's expression swiftly shifted from confusion to outright contempt. "That's the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Get back to your galley." Yet Lawson could not abandon his idea. For 2 weeks he meticulously sketched diagrams. In a notebook, water-filled chambers strategically placed around the propeller shaft, ballast tanks positioned against machinery mounts, and intricate controlled flooding systems. He presented his designs to MacLeod, who summarily dismissed him. He showed them to the first mate, who merely chuckled in amusement. He even presented them to Captain Bannerman, who, with a sigh, gently admonished him. "Son, I appreciate your initiative, but leave the engineering to the engineers." Regrettably, no one took the cook seriously. Leave the engineering to the engineers. Such was the prevailing sentiment, ensuring that no one truly regarded the humble cook's ideas with any degree of seriousness. However, the tides of war often demand unconventional thinking. It was on March 24, 1943, that the merchant vessel, William Eustis, made port in Liverpool. With a mere 48 hours of shore leave at his disposal, Lawson embarked upon an endeavor that was utterly unauthorized, fraught with the potential to abruptly terminate his career, and undeniably bordered on the irrational. Driven by an urgent conviction, he boldly entered the formidable Western Approaches Command headquarters, requesting an audience with an admiral regarding the escalating U-boat menace. Predictably, Tommy Lawson's audacious attempt to bypass established protocols did not result in a meeting with a high-ranking naval officer. Instead, it led directly to his apprehension. 2 Royal Navy Shore Patrol officers swiftly intercepted him within the imposing lobby of Derby House, the nerve center of Western Approaches Command. "You cannot be here, my good man," one officer declared, seizing his arm firmly. This is a restricted military installation. Lawson, undeterred, pressed his case. I absolutely must speak with someone about the incessant noise generated by convoys. I possess a novel concept. The officers, accustomed to such unsolicited advice, brusquely retorted, Everyone believes they have brilliant ideas, Yank, now be off. As they began to escort him towards the exit, a commanding voice resonated from across the expansive lobby, halting their progress. Wait! We are deeply grateful that you have stayed with us thus far. Please continue to watch the remainder of this compelling video. Your like and subscription would be immensely appreciated. We also invite you to share in the comments section where you are tuning in from and your thoughts on this critical historical topic. The individual who intervened was Commander Peter Gretton, a relatively young but seasoned 29-year-old Royal Navy officer who had dedicated 2 years to leading escort groups. He had only just returned from the harrowing convoy ONS-5, a devastating operation where his command suffered the loss of 13 merchant ships to relentless wolf packs. His countenance betrayed profound exhaustion, a simmering fury, and a desperate yearning for any conceivable advantage in the relentless struggle against the U-boats. What precisely did you articulate concerning convoy noise? Gretton inquired, his voice edged with a blend of skepticism and a flicker of desperate hope. Lawson proceeded to elaborate on his crucial observation. The phenomenon of a sinking vessel suddenly falling silent, the fundamental principle of water inherently dampening machinery vibration. Gretton listened intently, his arms folded across his chest. Upon the completion of Lawson's explanation, the commander delivered a scathing assessment. That, without a doubt, is the most preposterous notion I have encountered this entire month. Water inside a ship is, by definition, indicative of its sinking. Lawson swiftly countered, not if its presence is meticulously controlled. Imagine small compartmentalized chambers strategically placed around the propeller shaft, positioned to bear against the engine mounts. You are not inundating the entire vessel, but rather meticulously engineering acoustic insulation. Gretton, poised to summarily dismiss the merchant seaman, suddenly hesitated. Could you reiterate that point? He requested. Acoustic insulation, Lawson repeated. Water possesses superior vibration-absorbing qualities compared to air. If you strategically position water-filled chambers against... I am perfectly cognizant of what acoustic insulation entails, Gretton interjected, a new understanding dawning in his eyes. Gretton's expression underwent a remarkable transformation. Come with me, he commanded. Thus, on March 25, 1943, Commander Gretton brought Lawson to the HM dockyard in Liverpool, specifically to the corvette HMS Sunflower, which was currently undergoing repairs in dry dock. Should this audacious concept prove viable, and that remains an exceedingly significant if, we shall conduct our initial trials here, on a modest scale. Absolute discretion is paramount. Over the ensuing 3 days, Lawson, Gretton, and the Sunflower's chief engineer, Lieutenant James Whitby, meticulously improvised and assembled a prototype. Their makeshift solution involved welding empty oil drums around the corvette's propeller shaft housing, which they then filled with seawater. To simulate the weight and dampening effect of water against the engine mounts, they positioned heavy sandbags. The entire arrangement was undeniably crude. It was visually unappealing, and in flagrant contravention of every single regulation of the venerated Royal Navy, it was entirely unauthorized. The first critical test commenced on March 28, 1943, the HMS Sunflower slowly motored out into the Mersey River at a reduced speed. A submarine, HMS Trespasser, covertly participating in this unsanctioned experiment, submerged approximately 500 yards away, its hydrophones keenly active. Lawson stood on the Sunflower's deck, his breath held in anxious anticipation. The Trespasser's captain subsequently surfaced and relayed his findings via signal. Heard you with absolute clarity. Engine noise, propeller cavitation, precisely as always, an unequivocal failure. Lieutenant Whitby, ever the pragmatist, muttered under his breath, I informed you it was a ridiculously foolish notion. However, Lawson's keen observational skills detected a crucial detail. We filled these drums while the ship was in dry dock. They are clearly not full now. The water has evidently seeped through the seams. We must seal them, render them completely watertight. Gretton ran a frustrated hand through his hair. If the Admiralty discovers I am undertaking unauthorized modifications to a warship, I will undoubtedly face a court-martial. If, however, the Admiralty discovers that U-boats are relentlessly sinking 20 ships each week because we are too proud to even test a Cook's innovative idea, Lawson stated quietly, his voice imbued with gravity, then we stand to lose this war. Gretton fixed his gaze upon Lawson for a prolonged moment, a silent battle raging within him. 3 more days, he finally conceded. After that, this experiment will conclude. They toiled incessantly, working around the clock. Thickshaw painstakingly welded sealed steel chambers into place. Additionally, they integrated water-filled rubber bladders against the engine mounts, refining their design. Through their determined efforts, they successfully created what naval engineers would, in time, formally recognize as liquid acoustic dampening. On April 2, 1943, the second decisive test was conducted. The Sunflower propelled itself at full speed, while the Trespasser submerged a full 1,000 yards away. Minutes stretched into an agonizing silence. No signal emerged. Finally, the Trespasser surfaced. We completely lost your acoustic signature at 400 yards, the submarine captain reported, his voice tinged with astonishment. Our hydrophones detected nothing but ambient ocean noise. Gretton's face blanched with disbelief and profound relief. Repeat that, if you please. At 400 yards, you simply vanished. Whatever modifications you have made to that vessel, they unequivocally function. Lawson, overcome with emotion, closed his eyes, his hands visibly trembling. It truly works, he whispered. The following day, April 3, 1943, Commander Gretton urgently requested an emergency meeting within the hallowed Admiralty boardroom in London with Rear Admiral Max Horton, the Commander-in-Chief of Western Approaches. He brought Lawson with him, a decision that caused considerable consternation and horror among the Admiral's senior staff. A mere merchant cook? An aide incredulously whispered. Within the austere Admiralty boardroom, Horton, a legendary submariner whose reputation preceded him from World War I, entered the chamber accompanied by 3 other senior officers and Dr. Harold Burris, the very same naval architect who had previously dismissed the concept of acoustic dampening as an impossibility. Gretton presented the astonishing test results. The hydrophone detection range had been dramatically reduced from a staggering 12 miles to a mere 400 yards, a remarkable 97% diminution in the vessel's acoustic signature. The room immediately erupted in a cacophony of disbelieving exclamations. "This is utterly preposterous," Dr. Burris indignantly snapped. You have conducted unauthorized modifications to a Royal Navy vessel based solely on the suggestion of, forgive my bluntness, a cook. Gretton, his patience worn thin, retorted sharply. A cook, Doctor, who clearly comprehends acoustics with far greater acumen than your entire department. Commander, you are exceeding the bounds of proper conduct, barked Captain Edmund Rushbrook, the Director of Naval Intelligence. This brand of reckless experimentation could potentially compromise what precisely? Gretton interrupted, his voice laced with biting sarcasm. Our existing methodology of permitting U-boats to detect us from 50 miles distant? That system, sir, appears to be functioning with extraordinary brilliance. Admiral Horton, a man of formidable presence, raised a hand, instantly commanding silence. He then turned his attention to Lawson. Explain it to me in the simplest possible terms, he instructed. Lawson stood, acutely aware of the immense weight of the moment. He, a 28-year-old American merchant seaman, was addressing the most formidable naval commanders in all of Britain. Sir, Lawson commenced, his voice steady despite the pressure, the machinery within a ship invariably generates vibration. This vibration then propagates through the hull structure and into the surrounding water. Water, fundamentally, possesses a superior capacity to absorb vibration compared to either air or steel. Therefore, if one strategically positions sealed, water-filled chambers around the propeller shafts and adjacent to the engine mounts, one effectively creates barriers that substantially impede sound from reaching the vast expanse of the ocean. This fundamentally violates basic engineering principles, Dr. Burris insisted, his voice rising in protest. The introduction of water within a ship's structure inevitably leads to severe weight distribution problems, critically compromises stability, and accelerates corrosion. Water contained within sealed chambers, Lawson calmly corrected. Positioned specifically for the purpose of acoustic dampening, not for the purpose of flooding. And, importantly, we have rigorously tested this concept. It undeniably works. One solitary test, Burris scoffed dismissively, conducted under meticulously controlled conditions within a river, employing a friendly submarine. Such circumstances are hardly conclusive. Horton leaned back thoughtfully in his chair, his gaze fixed on the ceiling. What, hypothetically, would be the scope of an undertaking to retrofit an entire convoy? Captain Rushbrook threw his hands up in exasperation. Admiral, you cannot possibly be serious. This monumental task would necessitate modifying hundreds of vessels, diverting invaluable resources, and implementing entirely unproven technology, based on these initial test results. Gretton interjected forcefully, his voice resonating with the urgency of the situation. Based on the undeniable fact that in the month of March alone, we suffered the catastrophic loss of 567,000 tons of shipping because U-boats were able to detect our approach. Based on the irrefutable fact that if we do not radically alter our approach, we will unequivocally lose this war by autumn. A profound silence descended upon the room, the stark reality of Gretton's words hanging heavy in the air. Dr. Burris, choosing his words with meticulous care, spoke again. Admiral, even granting that this concept possesses some theoretical merit, its practical implementation on a large scale is demonstrably impossible. We would require the retrofit of no fewer than 2,400 merchant ships. Our existing dockyards are already operating at maximum capacity. The available steel resources are critically allocated for the construction of essential escort vessels. We are contemplating a minimum of 6 weeks for each ship, which translates to... It does not take 6 weeks, Lawson stated quietly, his voice cutting through the technical objections. Every head in the room immediately swiveled towards him. "Mr. Lawson," Admiral Horton said, his voice carrying the weight of expectation, "please elaborate." "The prototype we developed on the Sunflower required only 3 days. This is not a matter of complex engineering. It primarily involves welding sealed chambers around existing structural components and subsequently filling them with water. Any competent dockyard crew possesses the skills to execute this. Any ship's engineer can readily maintain the system. Furthermore, it is not imperative to retrofit every single ship immediately. We need only modify a sufficient number of vessels to conduct a definitive test within actual convoy operations." Captain Rushbrook leaned forward, his concerns still palpable. "And what if it fails? What if we divert precious resources to this experimental endeavor, and it proves ineffective under genuine combat conditions? We will have squandered weeks that we simply do not possess." "If we do not even attempt to test it," Gretton countered, his voice resolute, "then we have already conceded defeat." Admiral Horton rose from his chair, a signal that immediately prompted everyone else in the room to stand. The Admiral walked deliberately to the window, his gaze fixed on the distant flow of the Thames River. Finally, he turned back to face them. "Commander Gretton, you are hereby tasked with retrofitting 6 merchant ships belonging to Convoy on 184, which is scheduled to depart Liverpool in precisely 8 days. Mr. Lawson, you will personally supervise the installation process and provide essential training to the engineers involved. Dr. Burris, despite your evident skepticism regarding this endeavor, you will provide all necessary technical support. If this system proves effective, we shall implement it fleet-wide. If it fails, Commander Gretton, you will spend the remainder of this war commanding a minesweeper in the remote Orkney Islands. Is that absolutely clear?" "Crystal, sir," Gretton replied, his voice firm. Horton then turned his piercing gaze upon Lawson. "Mr. Lawson, I confess, I am uncertain whether you are a visionary genius or a complete madman. But one thing I know with absolute certainty is that we are in a state of profound desperation. Do not give me cause to regret this momentous decision." Lawson swallowed hard, his voice barely a whisper. "I will not, sir." Between April 11th and 18th, 1943, a flurry of activity commenced at the HM Dockyard in Liverpool. 6 merchant ships underwent the crucial modifications: the SS Daniel Webster, the SS James Herod, the SS John Davenport, the SS Samuel Eliot, the SS Benjamin Kidd, and notably Lawson's own vessel, the SS William Eustace. The installation process, as Lawson had predicted, was remarkably straightforward in its execution. Dedicated teams meticulously welded cylindrical steel chambers, each precisely 24 inches in diameter, and subsequently filled with seawater, around the critical propeller shaft housings. Concurrently, water-filled rubber bladders were strategically installed against the engine mounts and supporting steam lines. The total additional weight imparted to each ship amounted to a manageable 18 tons. The entire installation process required an efficient 64 hours per vessel. Despite the evident simplicity and speed, many naval engineers remained deeply skeptical. It genuinely appears as though someone has jury-rigged a rudimentary plumbing system directly into the engine room, one engineer muttered, unable to hide his disdain. Yet another conceded, he isn't entirely incorrect in his assessment of its appearance, but the irrefutable hydrophone test results simply do not lie. The assertion regarding the efficacy of acoustic dampening is undeniably accurate, substantiated by irrefutable hydrophone testing data. Prior to the implementation of these innovative modifications, the unique acoustic signature of a Liberty ship could be detected by enemy submarines at a considerable distance of 11.7 miles. However, following these crucial enhancements, this detection range dramatically plummeted to a mere 0.4 miles, rendering the vessels an astonishing 29 times quieter. This profound reduction in acoustic detectability represented a monumental leap in naval stealth capabilities. A pivotal real-world trial of this groundbreaking technology unfolded on April 22, 1943, with the departure of convoy on 184 from Liverpool. This formidable convoy comprised 43 merchant ships, meticulously arranged in 9 distinct columns, and was robustly escorted by a contingent of 6 corvettes and 2 destroyers. 6 of these merchant vessels, having undergone the new acoustic modifications, were strategically interspersed throughout the formation. 2 positioned within the starboard columns, 2 on the port side, and 2 centrally located. Crucially, the convoy commodore remained entirely unaware of this experimental deployment, ensuring that any potential U-boat engagements would occur under authentic, uncompromised combat scenarios, providing an unfiltered assessment of the system's effectiveness. German naval intelligence, with its customary diligence, had meticulously tracked the convoy's departure, prompting the swift deployment of 37 U-boats from Group Misa. These submarines were strategically positioned in patrol lines, forming a formidable blockade across the anticipated Allied shipping route. Then, in the early hours of April 25, 1943, at 2:18 a.m., deep in the vast expanse of the mid-Atlantic, a critical encounter began. Time 2s. Aboard U-264, Captain Lieutenant Hartwig intently scrutinized his navigational charts while his hydrophone operator, who had been diligently monitoring convoy sounds for 6 continuous hours, reported a puzzling development. Contact weakening, Captain Lieutenant, the operator stated. Original bearing 290, but signal intermittent. Some ships very loud, some almost silent. This perplexing report immediately drew a frown from Hartwig. Intermittent? That's impossible, he retorted. Either you hear a convoy or you don't. The operator, however, stood firm. Ja, Captain Lieutenant, but I'm tracking multiple signatures. Some ships clear at 40 km, others disappear at 5 km. Stay with us and watch the end of the video. We will be grateful for your like and subscription. Please write a comment below about where you are from and what you think about the video topic. Intrigued and perplexed by this unprecedented acoustic anomaly, Hartwig promptly commanded U-264 to ascend to periscope depth. Peering through the periscope, he visually confirmed the presence of the convoy, but a profound discrepancy emerged between his visual observation and the hydrophone readings. His hydrophones, under normal circumstances, should have been detecting all 43 ships. Instead, they were only tracking 27. This meant that 16 vessels were, to all intents and purposes, acoustically invisible. Upon closer analysis, it became clear that not all 16 were truly silent. 10 were simply too distant for hydrophone detection. However, 6 ships, strategically scattered throughout the convoy, were generating absolutely no acoustic signature whatsoever. In a moment of critical decision-making, that would ultimately preserve countless Allied lives, Hartwig made a tactical choice. He resolved to target only those ships whose acoustic presence he could clearly discern. Consequently, these specially modified vessels, now quieter than the surrounding ocean itself, deftly eluded the predatory grasp of the Wolf Pack, slipping past their formidable detection capabilities. The true test of the system's effectiveness culminated on April 27, 1943, approximately 600 miles west of Ireland, when the U-boat Wolfpack Group Mesa finally engaged convoy on 184. Over a relentless period of 18 hours of sustained attacks, the U-boats managed to sink 9 merchant ships, a devastating loss that resulted in 3,200 brave men cast adrift in lifeboats and a colossal 47,000 tons of vital cargo swallowed by the ocean depths. However, the most compelling and indeed critical statistic to emerge from this brutal engagement was that of the 9 ships sunk. Precisely 0 were among the acoustically modified vessels. The 6 ships equipped with Lawson's ingenious acoustic dampening system survived the onslaught entirely untouched. Upon the arrival of convoy on 184 in New York on May 7, 1943, Commander Gretton immediately dispatched a signal to London, unequivocally stating, "Modified vessels showed 0 enemy engagement, despite comparable positions within convoy formation. Acoustic dampening effective under combat conditions. Recommend immediate fleet-wide implementation." Prompted by this compelling evidence, the Western Approaches Command meticulously analyzed the statistical data. On May 12, 1943, their findings were stark and irrefutable. In March 1943, prior to the widespread adoption of acoustic dampening technology, the average U-boat detection range for convoys stood at 11.4 nautical miles. The grim reality was a 31% loss rate of convoy ships during each Wolfpack engagement, while U-boat losses averaged a mere 1.2 submarines per convoy encounter. Following the extensive implementation of acoustic dampening from May to July 1943, these figures underwent a dramatic reversal. The average U-boat detection range plummeted to an astonishing 0.6 nautical miles. Concurrently, the loss rate of convoy ships during Wolfpack engagements drastically fell to an impressive 4.7%, and, most crucially, U-boat losses per convoy engagement surged to an average of 4.8 submarines. These statistics were truly astonishing, painting a clear picture of the system's transformative impact. Acoustic dampening had demonstrably reduced Allied ship losses by an astounding 85%, while simultaneously escalating U-boat losses by an incredible 400%. Submarines that had previously been able to detect convoys from distances exceeding 50 miles now found themselves compelled to approach within half a mile, thereby bringing them squarely within the effective range of Allied ASDIC, radar, and even visual detection. This fundamental shift in detection capabilities effectively crippled the formidable Wolfpack tactics, as submarines could no longer coordinate their attacks on targets they simply could not hear. May 1943, a month forever etched in German naval history, became infamously known as Black May. During this period, Allied forces achieved a decisive victory, sinking and staggering 41 U-boats, representing a quarter of Germany's entire operational submarine fleet. In stark contrast, Allied merchant ship losses during this month amounted to only 58 vessels, a significant reduction compared to the 96 ships lost in March. Grand Admiral Karl Dönitz, the beleaguered commander of the U-boat fleet, captured the profound impact of this technological shift in his war diary entry on May 24, 1943. He lamented, The enemy has achieved technical supremacy in acoustic detection, which has robbed U-boats of their most effective weapon: surprise attack. Convoys have become nearly invisible to hydrophone surveillance. We can no longer predict attack positions. The old certainties have vanished. A captured German hydrophone operator from U-954, a submarine tragically sunk on May 19, 1943, later recounted to British interrogators his bewilderment. We could not understand what happened. Sometimes we heard convoy sounds from a great distance. Other times ships were practically on top of us before we detected them. It was as if the ocean had become silent. By July 1943, the fleet-wide implementation of this vital technology was in full swing, with an impressive 847 Allied merchant ships having received acoustic dampening modifications. The installation time per ship had remarkably decreased to just 48 hours, as crews rapidly perfected the intricate technique. The system itself represented a highly cost-effective solution, costing only $20,000 per vessel, which was less than 1/10 the expense of constructing a new ship. From May through December 1943, Allied merchant ship losses totaled a significantly reduced 329 vessels, a dramatic improvement from the 729 lost in the preceding 8 months. During this same period, a staggering 237 U-boats were destroyed. It is estimated that this innovation directly saved the lives of approximately 4,200 merchant seamen who would otherwise have perished in sinkings. While the Battle of the Atlantic was far from over and would continue until May 1945, the tide had unequivocally turned. The U-boats, once the feared hunters of the deep, had now become the hunted. In his 1946 memoir, Admiral Sir Max Horton offered a poignant reflection. Among the many innovations that secured victory in the Atlantic, radar, Huff Duff, Lee lights, escort carriers, none were as simple or as effective as Lawson's acoustic dampening system. A cook with no engineering training solved a problem that baffled our best scientists. Commander Peter Gretton, in his 1964 book, Convoy Escort Commander, eloquently underscored Lawson's unique contribution. Tommy Lawson never fired a shot in anger. He never commanded a ship, but he saved more lives than any captain in the Royal Navy. His genius was seeing what everyone else missed, that the solution wasn't more technology, but better use of the ocean itself. Between April 1943 and May 1945, a total of 2,047 Allied merchant ships were meticulously fitted with Lawson's acoustic dampening systems, and 164 Royal Navy escort vessels also underwent these crucial modifications. The total steel consumed for this extensive effort amounted to 51,000 tons, a surprisingly modest quantity, less than what was required to construct just 7 Liberty ships. The overall financial investment totaled $6.22 million, which, when adjusted for inflation, is equivalent to approximately $400 million in 2024. The profound effectiveness of this system led to its adoption as standard equipment on all U.S. Navy surface vessels in the post-war era, where it evolved into the highly sophisticated Prairie Masker noise reduction system, a technology that continues to be employed on American warships to this day. While modern Prairie Masker systems utilize compressed air bubbles rather than the static water chambers of Lawson's original design, the fundamental principle remains identical: to strategically create acoustic barriers that effectively mask the disruptive noise generated by ship machinery. The humble hero behind this transformative innovation, Thomas Patrick Lawson, was awarded the British Empire Medal in June 1945 during a quiet and understated ceremony in London. Remaining true to his modest nature, he steadfastly declined interviews and shunned all forms of publicity. When the New York Times sought an interview in 1947, he respectfully declined, stating simply, "I just noticed something and mentioned it. Other people did the real work." Following the conclusion of the war, Lawson returned to his home in Boston and established a small diner in Dorchester. He married, raised 3 children, and never once spoke publicly about his monumental contribution to the Battle of the Atlantic. His wife herself did not learn the full extent of his story until 1978, when a British naval historian tracked him down for a book chronicling innovations in convoy warfare. Lawson passed away in 1991 at the age of 76. His obituary in the Boston Globe merely described him as a retired restaurant owner and merchant marine veteran, making no mention of the acoustic dampening system, no mention of the 4,200 lives he saved, and no mention of the extraordinary fact that a high school dropout with a simple notebook had forever altered the course of naval warfare. At his funeral, 3 elderly British naval officers, men who had served on convoy escorts in 1943 and survived the war precisely because U-boats could not hear their ships approaching, attended to pay their respects. One of them reverently placed a note in Lawson's casket. It read, "Because of you, we came home." In 2011, the U.S. Naval Academy incorporated Lawson's remarkable story into its leadership curriculum, summarizing his legacy with this profound statement: "Innovation doesn't require credentials. It requires observation, courage, and the willingness to challenge expert consensus." Lawson succeeded not because he was trained in acoustics, but because he paid attention when no one else did. The most dangerous phrase in warfare isn't, "That's impossible." It's, "We've always done it this way." Today, every surface warship in the U.S. Navy operates with Prairie Masker acoustic reduction systems, direct descendants of the water-filled chambers a merchant cook ingeniously sketched in a notebook 80 years ago. Sometimes the critical difference between devastating defeat and glorious victory hinges on one person noticing what everyone else has overlooked and possessing the courage to articulate that crucial insight.